While people of the current generations may see this guy as just a college tour speaker, Public Enemy back in the 80s and 90s was a big deal in politics for young black people, myself included. I may not have come from the background, but the message being said in their music was something that is really echoing of the times it was, and maybe coming back to the times that will come out of the times here. It was coming out of sort of the civil rights movement and us younger people not having to understand and learn those things and deal with those issues, and still seeing some of the issues that were like sort of splintered from what the folks that fought for these things did. Now that we're seeing some of these things in a light that seems more like the 60s, pretty similar back to what we're seeing at the 80s and 90s, and maybe it's already here. The line that popped in my head as I went over this story a few times is the line from Fight the Power. And that's our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We've got to fight the powers that be. And that is something that resonated with me back in 89 as a teenager, although as a young punk, didn't quite understand what's going on. Now in these days, it makes a lot of sense. And the big issue with this is not the line Chuck D was saying, because it was basically a fight the power for the black people that were here and have dealt with oppression for hundreds of years, but the freedom of speech part on who we are. And so, why is this an issue? Because the Trump administration is moving to cancel student visas for pro-Palestinian protesters. These are for people who are protesting what's going on right now in Gaza, who are putting their faith, their push, their ideal that the Palestinians are really the fall guy and they should be getting more love from this thing, while Donald Trump is pushing, I'll say the agenda it is sort of the pro-Israel agenda that we sort of have. I'm a person who's pro-Israel. I also think the Palestinians or the Gazans, or let's say Hamas, shouldn't do what they did, and that Israel is really not being good to the Palestinians on its own. There's a lot of fault in these stars, if you will. But Trump signed his executive order yesterday, as we're recording this on the 30th, to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses. It includes provisions to cancel student visas and deport non-citizen students who participate in pro-Palestinian protests, such as labeling their support for Hamas, which is pro terrorism. Not quite the same, but seen the same light. Now, the administration say this is secure safety measures for students on campuses. And of course, increase anti-Semitic incidents on campuses, and which is a good thing. Having less instances where Jewish students or people in general feel unsafe because of a protest that goes a bit violent is an issue. But fight the powers that be on freedom of speech. Non-citizen students and staff could be sent home and have their visas canceled because they're speaking out with freedom of speech, something that Americans shouldn't have to do. Americans do get arrested for protests that get out of hand. Americans do get arrested for getting into battles back and forth. Americans get arrested for storming capitals and trying to overturn elections. And then apparently those get overturned or pardoned, and everything's all fine and dandy on those ends. But as Americans, we have a right by citizenship, by birth, by naturalization, to say our government's not quite so great at the time and complain about it, or complain about pretty much anything you want to in an organized and a more or less peaceful manner. Considering peaceful protests is one thing. The protests that have gotten sort of out of hand in these things last semester for going on in Palestine is a whole other thing. And so a way for the federal government to sort of put its thumb on the scale and fight its power that be is to say, well, if you're not from here, we're going to send you home if you think the Palestinians are right. Oversimplification, but we have to oversimplify these things to get the right responses. You're not going to like the words I'm saying right now, because I'm not liking the words I'm saying right now, but people here in the United States have the right to protest by order of being on our soil and that being what's going on. If the people here are not from here, they are tasting a freedom that they probably don't have so much of at home, and they're probably going to love it, and hopefully they will one day do what they can to become actual working citizens of this nation. That would be awesome. Citizens of this nation who have a right to say what they need to say, feel that needs to be said, and will do what they can in a democratic and peaceful protest manner to get their word out. However, when it gets violent, when it gets super disruptive, which sort of the point of protest, disrupted to the point that you're paying attention, when you actually get in the way of business and commerce and getting kids to school and making people feel fear for themselves, that's when things need to happen. Are we sending them back to where they came from? Apparently, we're sending a lot of people back to where they came from here if you want to believe how the administration is working, because they're bad people. They're doing bad things. They shouldn't be here if they don't believe everything we believe, which here in America, you don't have to believe everything we believe. That's sort of the point. Is this giving students from foreign places a raw deal, or should they be held accountable just like this? That's the question. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Is this us showing America in a good light and showing what happens for people who abuse that light? Or is this us abusing that light itself and saying, we're going to push these people away because they don't have the right to do this? And it's just one more step from pushing people away who believe they have the right to do this by birth, by naturalization, by citizenship, and saying that their opinion doesn't matter either. So let's crack down on them. Your opinions, very much warranted. Give it to me, folks. Bring the love, bring the hate, bring the thought. This is a big one. How are we going to deal with this one?